Why did the dust always taste like metal and memory? That was the first thing she noticed about Fob Grizzly, a remote outpost at the far edge of the war, where the air itself seemed to carry the weight of things left unsaid. The dust settled on everything: the steel walls, the cracked seats in the mess hall, and the tired faces of soldiers who had stopped believing in anything clean. It coated the sky in a dull red haze that turned every sunset into a slow bleed. Into that world walked Master Sergeant Anna Petrova. A transfer, a nobody on paper, just another name, another file, another story lost in the endless churn of deployments. But the whispers started before she even unpacked her bag. "Who's the old lady?" someone muttered in the chow line. "She's 40-something, more like 50, another replied. "No way she's infantry, look at her hands." That last comment stuck. It always did, because once people saw her hands, they stopped seeing anything else. They were rough maps of old battles, cross-hatched scars that looked like melted silk over steel, knuckles swollen from breaks that never healed right, fingers slightly twisted, as if molded back together by someone who ran out of time. To the young soldiers, boys who'd only ever held rifles and PlayStation controllers, her hands looked broken, clumsy, weak. What they didn't know was that those hands had built, repaired, and calibrated more weapons than most of them had ever fired. What they didn't know was that every scar had a reason, every line a history. But Anna didn't explain. She didn't correct them. She just nodded when the supply sergeant handed her a bunk assignment and walked quietly past their stairs. In the army, silence was its own kind of power, if you knew how to use it. The next morning, the new arrivals were lined up in the motor pool. The air smelled like diesel and burned coffee. Colonel Marcus Thorne, commander of the battalion, stood before them, a man carved from regulation and reputation. Every crease in his uniform looked ironed by God himself. He scanned the faces, one by one, until his eyes landed on Anna. His expression changed just slightly, a flicker of something halfway between curiosity and disbelief. "Master Sergeant Petrova," he said finally, reading from the clipboard. "Logistics background, quartermaster qualified." He lowered the paper, looked her up and down, and paused. His eyes dropped to her hands. "You'll be assigned to the armory, counting rifles, logging ammo. We'll let the young ones handle the heavy lifting." The tone was polite, the meaning was. A few of the soldiers behind him smirked. One, Private Garcia, whispered, "Bet she drops the first magazine she touches." Anna just answered quietly, "Yes, sir." Her voice was steady, not cold, not defensive, just still. The colonel nodded once and moved on, judgment delivered, sentence carried out. Her world shrank to a concrete bunker, half buried under the desert wind. The armory. Rows of metal racks, rifles lined like sleeping soldiers, the air thick with gun oil and forgotten effort. Sergeant Major Vance, a man whose face looked carved from old leather, showed her around. "These racks are ready for issue," he grunted, motioning to one side. "Those are for repair, the pile in the corner graveyard, anything too busted to fix. Log everything in, log everything out, and don't touch what you're not supposed to." That was it, her introduction to her new kingdom, a room full of weapons no one respected anymore. The next few days she followed orders, she logged, she counted, she filled out data slates, but her eyes, her instincts were doing something else entirely. Each time her fingers brushed against cold metal, she listened. The soldiers saw only a clerk. But her touch wasn't mechanical, it was diagnostic. She could feel the faint wobble of a worn stock, the sticky drag of a neglected bolt, the subtle hitch in a firing pin return. She didn't need reports or inspection sheets. The weapons spoke to her. They whispered their failures in every scratch and scrape. And what they told her wasn't good. These rifles weren't just dirty, they were dying. Gas rings loose, extractor springs weak, Carbon buildup in places that should have gleamed. She found fouling in the star chambers, gummy oil congealed in places that should have run smooth. They weren't ready for war. But she said nothing. She wasn't here to think or advise or warn. She was here to log and count. And she'd learned long ago what happens when you tell people things they don't want to hear. Outside the armory, the soldiers laughed loud and easy. Garcia, Chun, Miller, young, strong, invincible in their own heads. They treated their rifles like toys, slamming magazines, dragging barrels through the dust, bragging about shots that didn't matter. Anna watched from a distance, not judging, just observing. In the quiet moments when the desert wind slipped through the vents, she thought of another armory years ago. Another place, another life. A flash of light. The scream of metal bending. The smell of burning hands. She pushed the memory down. She'd left that world behind, or maybe it had left her. 7 days later, the warning signs turned into consequences. An alert came down from higher command, a surprise readiness evaluation. A live fire competition between battalions, the kind of thing that could make or break reputations. Colonel Thorne wanted victory. His soldiers wanted glory. But their weapons wanted mercy. The training tempo spiked, everyone rushed, range days doubled, pressure climbed. And then the first rifles started to fail. A stovepipe jam here, a double feed there. Then more. And more. What had been whispers of mechanical fatigue turned into full-blown chaos. Garcia cursed on the firing line as his weapon locked up mid-drill. "This junk won't even cycle," he shouted, slamming the stock against the dirt. Chun's rifle failed next. Bolt override catastrophic, useless without tools. Across the outpost, rifles started dying faster than they could be fixed. Panic spread like smoke. Colonel Thorne prowled behind the firing line, his face thundercloud dark, every jam a personal insult. Fix it, he barked, but no amount of shouting could fix years of neglect. The men started blaming everything, the dust, the heat, the humidity, anything but themselves. Inside the armory, Anna could feel the storm. Piles of broken rifles stacked in the corner, requests for parts she didn't have, voices rising in frustration. But she stayed calm, she always did. Her scarred hands moved slowly, methodically, signing forms, logging serial numbers, but her eyes missed nothing. She saw the fear creeping into the young soldiers' movements, the way their confidence cracked, the way arrogance bled into panic. She didn't need to say it aloud to know what was coming. Something was about to break, and it wouldn't just be the weapons. 2 days before the evaluation, Alpha Company ran a final assault drill, a test before the real thing. Private Garcia sprinted through the course, dropped to a knee, aimed, and heard the sound every soldier dreads. Click. He froze, tried again, click. His pulse spiked. He yanked the charging handle, ejected a live round, tried again. Nothing. His sergeant shouted over the gunfire, "Clear it, Garcia. Move, move." But his hands shook. Sweat dripped into his eyes. The bolt was jammed forward, locked over a spent casing. A full mechanical seizure, a bolt override. He was dead in the water. Up on the observation tower, Colonel Thorne lowered his binoculars and swore. The whole drill had come apart. Soldiers stumbled, momentum gone, leadership crumbling. At the edge of the range, Anna stood holding a box of ammunition, watching. She saw Garcia's panic, the useless shouting, the spreading breakdown. And she couldn't stay silent anymore. She set the box down and walked forward, slow, calm, unhurried. The noise around her blurred, the soldiers firing, the orders shouted, it all faded. She stopped in front of Garcia, who was kneeling in the dust, red-faced and furious. "Let me see it," she said quietly. He looked up, startled. "What? I can fix it, ma'am, I just—" "Let me see it." Something in her tone, steady, controlled, cut through his panic. He handed her the rifle. For a heartbeat, the entire firing line went still. Every soldier's eyes locked on her scarred hands, the same hands they'd mocked, the same hands they'd called ruined. And then she moved. No hesitation, no fumbling, just pure, fluid precision. Magazine release, bolt pressure relieved, tool improvised from a spare round, a flick of her wrist, casing free, bolt forward, magazine seated, forward assist tapped. 5 seconds. She handed the rifle back. Try now. Garcia blinked, raised the weapon, fired, crack. A perfect, clean shot. The sound echoed across the range, sharp and final. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Anna turned, walked back to her ammo box and picked it up. The whispers started again, but this time they weren't mocking. "Did you see that?" Chun whispered. "Her hands," Garcia said softly, "they're not broken." And for the first time since she arrived at Fob Grizzly, the wind itself seemed to pause, just long enough to let something new settle over the outpost. Not disbelief. Not arrogance. Respect. They didn't know it yet, but everything had just changed. How fast can respect spread in a place built on pride? At Fob Grizzly, it began in whispers, low, cautious, like soldiers testing a new frequency. By the next morning, everyone had heard. The old quartermaster, the one with the scarred hands, had fixed a rifle mid-range faster than any of them had ever seen. No tools, no help, no hesitation. 5 seconds flat. Private Garcia, who had once laughed the loudest, now cleaned his weapon in silence. 3 times that night, he field-stripped it under the flickering light of the barracks lamp, trying to replicate the speed and precision she'd shown. He couldn't, not even close. And so the legend began. Not the kind of legend born from explosions and medals, but from something quieter, something that moved through the camp like a shift in the wind. When Anna walked through the compound now, conversations didn't stop, but they changed. Heads nodded, backs straightened. The laughter that used to trail behind her turned into murmured respect. No one knew where she'd learned to handle a rifle like that. No one asked, but the mystery made it worse or better, depending on who you asked. Even the officers noticed. Sergeant Major Vance, who'd spent decades seeing soldiers come and go, started watching her more closely. He saw what others missed: the precision, the quiet authority, the way soldiers left the armory walking taller. It wasn't discipline she inspired. It was something deeper: belief. Inside the armory, her routine didn't change. She still signed out weapons, logged ammunition, and worked alone, but the silence wasn't as heavy anymore. One afternoon, a shadow fell across her desk. "Oh, Master Sergeant." It was Garcia, holding a bolt carrier group awkwardly in his hand. His face was red, not from embarrassment, but from humility. "This part," he said quietly, "the extractor pin keeps slipping. I've been trying to seat it right, but—" Anna looked up, her eyes unreadable. She didn't say a word. She just extended her hand. Garcia placed the part in her palm. Her fingers moved with that same calm rhythm, the quiet confidence of someone who understood not just the weapon, but what it meant to hold one. She twisted the pin slightly, adjusted a spring tension by touch alone, and handed it back. "Try now," she said softly. Garcia did. It fit perfectly. He nodded. "Thank you, ma'am." Anna just went back to her work, saying nothing. But that moment, a simple fix, a quiet exchange, started something. Soon Chun came by with a trigger group that wouldn't reset. Then Miller showed up, asking for advice on cleaning optics. Then more soldiers followed, one by one, each carrying not just their weapons but their pride, chipped, humbled, ready to learn. And Anna, she never lectured, never said "I told you so." She just worked. Her silence was heavier than any speech. It carried lessons that couldn't be taught in manuals. The transformation spread across the battalion like wildfire. Within a week, rifles stopped failing. Maintenance logs filled up with names of soldiers volunteering extra time in the bays. Weapons gleamed under inspection lights. Sergeant Major Vance watched it all with a kind of grim satisfaction. He'd seen plenty of NCOs bark orders and inspire fear, but he'd never seen anyone rebuild respect the way Anna Petrova did from the inside out, one rifle at a time. Colonel Thorne noticed too, though he misunderstood what he was seeing. When the daily readiness reports showed a sudden drop in weapon malfunctions, he assumed it was Vance's doing. "Good work, Sergeant Major," Thorne said one morning, sipping burnt coffee in his office. "Looks like you finally got these kids to take their jobs seriously." Vance only grunted, his eyes flicking toward the window where the armory sat half buried in the dirt. "Yes, sir," was all he said. Thorne nodded, content with the illusion. The system worked, he thought, the hierarchy held. But deep down, a part of him wondered. He'd seen that woman's name on the roster. He felt something, a faint discomfort, when he'd looked into those gray, silent eyes. And then he dismissed it. To him, she was still the clerk with the broken hands. The day of the evaluation came too soon. The desert dawn broke sharp and cruel. The heat began before the sun had fully risen. The 101st Pathfinders arrived just after 900, lean, confident, their uniforms immaculate. They walked like men who had never lost a competition. Fob Grizzly, by contrast, looked tired. Their gear was mismatched, their faces worn, but there was something different this time. The laughter was gone, the arrogance replaced by quiet focus. They had something to prove to the colonel, to the Pathfinders, but mostly to themselves. The event was simple, a sequence of timed combat marksmanship drills, culminating in a long-range stress shoot. The team with the highest overall score would win. Grizzly's top shooter was Sergeant Miller, a man with confidence to spare and skill to back it up. His rifle, a personally customized M4, was his pride and joy. He called it Baby. He'd polished the trigger group, tuned the gas system, and installed a high-end optic. It was perfect, or so he believed. The competition started well. Grizzly matched the Pathfinders shot for shot, moving through the drills with precision that made even the observers nod. But as the final stage approached, the 600-meter stress shoot, the margin was razor-thin. 5 shots, 1 rifle, 1 chance. Miller adjusted his sling, ran the required 100 meters, dropped into position and took aim. His first shot cracked through the air, a clean hit. The crowd cheered. He cycled the bolt, took a breath and fired again. Click. Nothing. He frowned, pulled the charging handle, stuck, pulled again harder, nothing. A hairline vein pulsed in his temple. He yanked once more. The charging handle snapped clean off in his hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The rifle was dead, completely seized. A sheared bolt lug, a catastrophic failure. The Pathfinders smirked behind their scopes. The scorekeeper looked at the colonel. "Sir, if they can't continue, it's a forfeit." Colonel Thorne's face turned a shade darker than the desert sand. "No," he growled, "not like this." He turned to Vance. "Options." Vance hesitated only a moment, then said quietly, "There's one." Thorne glared. "Don't play games, Sergeant Major. Miller's rifle is scrap metal." Vance's expression didn't change. "Maybe the quartermaster can help." Thorne blinked. "Petrova, the clerk, you want me to hand her a broken rifle in the middle of a live competition?" "Yes, sir." The colonel stared at him, and for a moment something flickered behind his eyes, not belief, but desperation. "Fine," he snapped. "Get her, let her try." The armory was hot, dim, and silent when they brought it in. Miller's rifle laid on the table like a fallen soldier. He followed it in, pale, shaking. "It's the bolt," he muttered, "sheared off, locked up tight." Anna looked at him, then at the weapon. She didn't need to hear the explanation. Her hands already knew. "I need the parts kit," she said softly, "and the graveyard box." Vance sent a runner. Within minutes, the tools and the heap of broken rifles were in front of her. Colonel Thorne stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching, waiting for her to fail. She didn't speak, she didn't look up, she just started working. Pin by pin, piece by piece. The motion was almost hypnotic, mechanical, yet deeply human. Vance leaned closer to Thorne and handed him a data pad. "Sir," he said quietly, "I pulled her full file." Thorne frowned, irritated, and Vance tilted the screen toward him, "And you might want to read it." On the pad, a classified record unfolded, one that made the colonel's stomach drop. Name: Petrova Anna. Rank: Master Sergeant. Unit: Former Special Operations Group 7, disbanded. Role: Master Weaponsmith / Designated Marksman. Call sign: Kestrel. SOG 7, the Ghost Unit, the stuff of whispers, missions that didn't exist. Further down, the file detailed an IED blast during a classified operation. Anna Petrova had used her own body to shield a prototype weapon system from destruction, saving the mission, losing the use of her hands for nearly a year. The scars weren't signs of weakness. They were proof of sacrifice. Thorne's throat tightened as he read the final line. Medically cleared for limited duty, declined reassignment, voluntary demotion. He looked up slowly. Across the room, Anna's hands moved with impossible precision, pulling parts from broken rifles, machining metal with nothing but a file and instinct. Sparks flew. Sweat beaded her brow. Her movements were poetry in motion, not just repair but resurrection. In that moment, Thorne understood. He hadn't been protecting her from failure. She'd been protecting them from ignorance. And as the desert wind howled outside, the legend of Anna Petrova, Kestrel, began to rise again. How do you rebuild something that was never meant to break? In the armory, the answer came in the form of sound, the rhythm of steel against steel, the soft click of pins being driven free, the scrape of a file smoothing stubborn metal. Anna Petrova didn't move like an engineer. She moved like someone listening. Every motion, every adjustment was guided by instinct, not calculation, not measurement. Her scarred fingers glided across cold surfaces as if reading braille written in iron. The others stood back, unsure whether to help or just witness. Sergeant Major Vance leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. Colonel Thorne loomed behind him, his jaw set, his pride unraveling by the second. Sergeant Miller hovered nearby, helpless and ashamed, clutching the snapped charging handle from his beloved rifle like a fragment of guilt. "Sit," Anna said quietly, not looking up. Miller blinked. "Ma'am. You're shaking. Sit. This isn't your fault." Her tone wasn't harsh. It was firm, almost gentle, the way you'd talk to a younger version of yourself. She took the ruined rifle and laid it flat on the bench. She didn't curse at it, didn't sigh. She simply began the autopsy. The bolt was locked forward, fused with the barrel extension, a fatal wound for any weapon. But instead of despair, Anna saw opportunity. She reached for the graveyard box, the pile of rifles deemed unsalvageable. To everyone else, it was scrap. To her, it was memory. One by one, she began stripping them for parts. A buffer spring here, a barrel there, a bolt carrier that still had life left in it. The pieces scattered before her like bones from a forgotten battlefield. Colonel Thorne finally spoke. "You don't have the tools for this level of repair. You need." She cut him off without looking up. "Tools slow you down when you don't trust your hands." Her voice wasn't defiant. It was calm, factual, the kind of tone only earned through surviving mistakes. Thorne fell silent. Vance, standing nearby, suppressed a small smile. He'd seen her type before, the rare soldier who didn't care about rules or reputation, only results. But Petrova, she was something different. She was intent. Minutes turned into an hour. The air grew thick with the smell of oil and sweat. The heat inside the bunker seemed to pulse with each motion of her hands. She drove out pins with the butt of a small mallet. She used a file to shape mismatched parts, testing fits by touch, not sight. She adjusted the gas block by fractions of a millimeter, her thumb tracing the tension like a musician tuning a string. Sparks flew as she reshaped a component scavenged from another rifle. Thorne flinched at each spark, muttering under his breath, "She's going to ruin it." But Vance shook his head. "No, sir, she's not." Outside, the wind howled, a dry, relentless sound that carried the echoes of the competition still underway. Each distant gunshot was a ticking clock. Inside, Anna's world was narrow, her hands her breath, her heartbeat the steel. When the final part clicked into place, the sound was sharp, satisfying. The rifle that emerged from her bench was a patchwork of old and new, mismatched colors, uneven wear, an ugly Frankenstein of a weapon. But when she pulled the charging handle, the action was smooth as glass. She handed it to Miller. "It's not your rifle anymore," she said quietly. "It's better." Miller looked at it, all replacing disbelief. "It doesn't even look like." "It doesn't need to," she interrupted. "It just needs to shoot straight." He swallowed. "You think it'll work?" Her eyes met his, calm, certain. "It will." Then she turned back to the workbench, wiping her hands on a rag as if brushing away ghosts. Behind her, Thorne stood stiffly. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words felt heavy, unworthy. Vance broke the silence first. "Sir," he said, pulling the data pad from his pocket again, "you saw her file, you know who she is." Thorne didn't answer. He was staring at Anna's hands, the same hands he'd dismissed days earlier. Hands that weren't just skilled, but sanctified by suffering. Finally he spoke, voice low. "Why is she still here, Vance? Someone like that should have been retired or teaching or—" Vance's eyes stayed on Anna. "Maybe she's tired of fighting wars where no one remembers what they're fighting for." Anna picked up the reassembled rifle and chambered a round. The metallic click echoed like punctuation at the end of a confession. "I need a test," she said. Vance nodded. "Range is clear, let's go." They stepped into the desert light. The heat hit like a wall, dry, shimmering, endless. Soldiers turned from their drills as they passed, curiosity burning brighter than the sun. When they reached the range, the pathfinders were already packing up. Their smug confidence radiated from across the field. The scoreboard was clear, they'd won. Grizzly had no more shooters. Miller took position. The new rifle gleamed dull and strange in his hands, heavier, unbalanced, alien. Anna stood beside him, her voice soft but steady. "The harmonics are different. There'll be a 2-centimeter drop at 600 meters. Aim high, center mass." He nodded, trying to memorize her tone more than her words. The Pathfinder's leader snorted from behind the spotting scope. "You really gonna trust that thing? Looks like it's made from scrap metal." Anna didn't even look his way. Scrap metal still kills when it's in the right hands. The air stilled. Miller took a breath. The world narrowed to his scope, crosshairs steady, trigger press clean. Crack! The target flinched, dead center hit. A murmur rippled through the observers. He cycled the bolt smooth, effortless, fired again. Crack, hit. Then again crack. And again crack. 5 shots, 5 perfect hits. The final target snapped back, dust exploding from the impact. Silence held for a heartbeat, then the field erupted. Cheers rolled across the range, raw and stunned. Soldiers shouted, helmets flew into the air. Fob Grizzly had done it. Against every expectation, every mockery, every quiet doubt, they'd won. Colonel Thorne stood frozen. The impossible was unfolding before him, and at the center of it all stood Anna Petrova, the woman he'd exiled to a desk. She didn't smile, she didn't bask in it. She just watched Miller lower the rifle, his eyes wide, his pride reborn. He turned to her. I don't even know how to thank you. Anna shook her head. You already did. Behind her, Vance exhaled slowly. Well, I'll be damned. Thorn finally moved, stepping forward through the celebrating crowd. Soldiers parted instinctively, falling silent as he approached. When he stopped in front of Anna, the desert wind caught the brim of his cap. His face, once stone, now looked almost human. He looked down at her scarred hands, not with pity but reverence. Then slowly, deliberately, he brought his hand to his brow and saluted. The gesture was sharp, perfect, a soldier's apology made without words. For a long moment, Anna didn't move. Then she returned the salute, crisp, precise, but with something deeper behind it. A quiet acknowledgement between two soldiers who had both been wrong in different ways. All around them, one by one, the others followed. Miller, Garcia, Chun, Vance, then every soldier from Alpha Company, a silent wave of salutes rising in the heat. No orders, no speeches, just respect. The woman they'd mocked, ignored, dismissed, stood alone, the desert sun glinting off the scars that once made her an outcast. Now those same scars gleamed like medals no one could take away. Later that night, the outpost was alive with celebration. Laughter, music, the clatter of empty cups, but Anna wasn't there. She never liked noise. Instead, she sat at the far end of the firing range, alone. The night was calm, the horizon painted in slow strokes of gold and violet. Before her, a rifle lay disassembled on a canvas mat. Not Miller's rifle, not the one that had won the day. Her own. She cleaned it methodically, her movements slow and deliberate. This wasn't maintenance, it was meditation. The brush through the barrel, the cloth over the bolt, the soft click of metal returning to its home. When she was done, she just sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the desert, the peace she had earned one motion at a time. Colonel Thorne found her there. He approached without the weight of command this time. No barked orders, no pride, just humility. The official report will say Sergeant Miller's weapon was replaced with a spare, he said quietly. No one needs to know what really happened. Anna didn't look up. Understood, sir. He hesitated, then, your old unit SOG-7. Word is they're reforming under a new command. They're looking for a master weaponsmith, a trainer. They're looking for Kestrel. Anna's hand stilled over the weapon. The call sign hung in the air like the echo of a life she'd already buried. After a moment, she said softly, my place is here, Colonel. These soldiers, their rifles are tired. Thorne nodded slowly, the meaning settling between them. As he turned to leave, he looked back one last time. Anna sat alone under the fading light, her hands scarred, steady, sacred, moving over the rifle like a prayer. They weren't broken. They were consecrated. And in the silence of the desert, her legacy was written, not in medals, not in files, but in the simple, undeniable truth of what she'd rebuilt. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. How far back does a scar really go? Is it just the mark left on the skin, or the silence that comes after the pain? Anna Petrova never told them, not Vance, not Thorne, not even the soldiers who had started to worship her in whispers. But somewhere, buried beneath layers of discipline and duty, the memory still breathed. It started years before Fob Grizzly. Long before the dust, the cracked barracks, and the sound of wind scraping across tin roofs. Back when she was still known by another name, Kestrel. The call sign wasn't given, it was earned. SOG-7 was a unit that didn't officially exist. Its records were buried under other names, its missions filed under classified incidents. They operated where the rules ended, deep recon, sabotage, and technology retrieval. Anna wasn't a trigger puller like the others. Her gift wasn't destruction, it was creation. She was the unit's master weaponsmith, The one who made sure that every rifle, every sidearm, every custom piece of machinery they carried into the dark worked flawlessly. The one they trusted with their lives every time they pulled a trigger. There were 7 of them in the team, ghosts who didn't wear patches, who erased their footprints as they walked. They were family in the strange, unspoken way only soldiers can be, bound by things no one else could ever understand. She remembered their faces even now. Ryder, the team lead, all steel and dry humor. Hawk, the breacher, loud enough to drown out fear. Silva, their medic, with steady hands and too much empathy. And herself, Kestrel, quiet, older, the strange one who treated rifles like living things. Their last mission began in the dead heat of summer, somewhere that didn't officially exist. A convoy ambushed, intelligence stolen, and with it, a prototype weapon system worth more than their entire careers combined. They were sent to recover it. It was supposed to be simple. It never was. The team infiltrated a canyon compound at night, dark sand, jagged rocks, the hiss of wind through broken stone. She carried her kit of tools, not guns, moving through shadows while the others cleared paths ahead. Every sound mattered, every breath was deliberate. But fate doesn't ask permission. The explosion came without warning, a buried IED, triggered not by pressure but by signal. Smart tech. Ryder went down instantly. Hawk was thrown into a wall. Anna remembered the sound before the pain, a deep, shattering thud that hollowed the air. Then heat. Then fire. When she came to, she was half buried in dust and blood. Her right hand was pinned beneath twisted metal. Smoke coiled from what was left of the prototype rifle system she'd been carrying. Somewhere behind her, the canyon burned. Her earpiece crackled. "Kestrel, report, Kestrel, where the hell are you?" She didn't answer, she couldn't. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. And then she saw it, the weapon, the prototype. It wasn't destroyed yet, but it was close. The casing glowed dull red from the heat. The optic lens was cracked. She could have crawled away. She could have saved herself. Instead, she reached for it. Her bare hand pressed against searing metal. The skin bubbled instantly. The pain was white-hot, absolute. She used her other hand to wedge a piece of her vest beneath it, lifting just enough to slide the system clear before the next blast wave hit. It wasn't heroism. It was instinct, the part of her that refused to let a weapon die without a fight. When the recovery team finally found her, she was barely conscious, cradling the weapon against her chest like a wounded animal. The medics had to pry it from her hands. They said she screamed once, not from pain, but when they tried to take it away. After that, there were months of hospitals, therapy, reconstruction. Her hands, once her greatest tools, became symbols of failure in the eyes of command. The damage was too extensive for full recovery. Nerve grafts, titanium pins, long, lonely hours of relearning how to move. Doctors told her she'd never handle small tools again. She didn't listen. Every night she practiced, picking up screws with tweezers, field stripping a sidearm one-handed, building muscle memory from pain. The scars became part of the process, a map she learned to navigate instead of hide. When the brass finally cleared her for limited duty, they offered her an early retirement, full benefits, ceremony, and applause. She declined. They called her stubborn. She called it unfinished business. The file said voluntary demotion. The truth was more complicated. After SOG-7 disbanded, she had no interest in ranks or ribbons. She wanted distance, a quiet place to keep moving, keep serving without the noise of politics or pity. So she took a quartermaster posting, first at a training base, then an outpost. Each transfer moved her farther from the spotlight until she landed at FOB Grizzly, a forgotten armory at the edge of the world. It was perfect. No one there asked questions. No one remembered Kestrel. They just saw the scars and assumed the story ended there. They were wrong. The desert wind tugged at the edges of her memory, dragging her back to the present. Fob Grizzly was quiet again. The competition was over, the cheers long faded. The stars above the base shimmered through the dust, distant, indifferent. Anna sat outside the armory, cleaning her weapon under a canopy of silence. She'd done her duty, she'd repaired the rifle, she saved the battalion's pride. But deep down, something still ached, not in her hands but in her soul. When you've lived long enough with ghosts, victory never feels like celebration. It feels like survival. Sergeant Major Vance found her there sometime after midnight. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, arms crossed, looking out over the empty range. Finally he said, "You know, I read that whole file top to bottom." Anna didn't look up. Dangerous habit. Vance smirked. "Yeah, well, curiosity killed more than cats in my line of work." He paused. "You could have gone home, you should have, after what happened." She finished oiling the bolt, her tone even. "Home's a strange word when you've lived out of barracks for 30 years. Vance nodded slowly. "You ever think about going back? They're rebuilding your old unit. They want you." Anna's fingers tightened slightly around the cleaning cloth. "And what would I do there? Teach them how to hold a wrench, how to bleed quietly." "That's not fair," he said. "No," she replied, setting the rifle down, "it's true." She finally looked at him then, the dim light catching the faint silver lines that crossed her skin. "These kids," she said softly, "they're careless, but they can learn, I can help them, that's enough." Vance studied her face for a long moment, the calm, the strength, the unspoken exhaustion. "You're not just fixing rifles, are you?" he said quietly. Anna gave a faint, sad smile. "Maybe not." He left her to the night. A few days later, the colonel called a formation. Officially, it was to recognize the unit's win against the Pathfinders. Unofficially, it was something else. The soldiers stood in rows, sun blazing overhead, uniforms crisp. Colonel Thorne stepped forward, his voice booming across the compound. "Discipline, readiness, excellence. These are words we throw around a lot," he began. "But sometimes it takes one person to remind us what they actually mean." He gestured to Anna, who stood off to the side, uncomfortable under the sudden attention. "This battalion owes its victory to someone who wasn't even supposed to be here for the fight. A person who proved that skill isn't in the hands, it's in the heart." The formation went silent. Garcia, Chun, and Miller stood straighter. Thorne's voice softened. Master Sergeant Petrova stepped forward. She hesitated. "Sir, that's not necessary." "That's an order," he said quietly. She walked to the front, her boots crunching against the gravel. Thorne met her eyes, and for once, there was no rank between them. "I misjudged you," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "And in doing so, I nearly cost this unit its pride. You taught my men what no training manual could: respect, precision, purpose." He turned to the soldiers. "Learn from her, every single one of you." The battalion saluted. Anna returned it slowly, then stepped back, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions, pride and discomfort, gratitude and grief. Applause broke out. She hated it. Noise never suited truth. Later, when the base fell quiet again, she stood outside the armory watching the sunset burn through the dust. The horizon glowed the same dull, red as the memory of fire. And for the first time in years, she whispered something into the wind, not quite a prayer, not quite a confession. "Still here," she said softly, "still building." The wind didn't answer. But somewhere far off, a metal door creaked open, the armory breathing again, ready for another day. Because some soldiers fight battles no one sees. They rebuild what others throw away. And sometimes, the strongest weapon a soldier can carry is a pair of scarred hands that never stop working. Why do some lessons stick only when they're earned through failure? In the days that followed the competition, Fob Grizzly changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but in small, quiet ways that mattered. For the first time in years, the sound of laughter in the barracks was replaced by something rarer: focus. Soldiers spent their downtime in the maintenance bays instead of the rec room. Rifles that once rattled from neglect now gleamed beneath fluorescent lights. The old habits, the careless loading, the slammed magazines, the lazy cleaning routines began to fade. And though no one had ordered it, everyone knew why. Anna Petrova. She never called a formation, never gave a speech. Her teaching wasn't loud. It lived in observation, in example. She'd simply appear silent as the wind during weapons checks or post-drill cleanups. If a soldier struggled with a jammed bolt, she'd kneel beside him, take the weapon and fix it without a word. Then she'd hand it back and wait, not for thanks but for understanding. Eventually, they stopped asking questions like, "How do you fix this?" and started asking, "Why does it break?" That's when she knew they were learning. Garcia was the first to truly change. Once the loudest complainer on base, he now carried his rifle like it was alive. His bunk was spotless. He spoke less, listened more. Chun followed, then Miller. By the third week, even the cocky new recruits from Bravo Company, kids fresh from basic, still smelling of detergent and bravado, whispered about the armory witch, who could sense a weapon's failure just by holding it. They didn't know she'd overheard. One afternoon, as she logged serial numbers, she heard the young soldiers talking outside the door. "She's gotta have some implant or something," one of them said. "No way someone just feels what's wrong with a gun." "Implant," Garcia snorted. "No, man, that's experience, and those scars, they're not from a lab." Anna smiled faintly to herself. She didn't correct them, let them wonder. Mystery had its uses. Sergeant Major Vance noticed the change in the numbers first. Weapon readiness, 98%. Malfunctions, nearly zero. Qualification scores, record highs. He dropped the report on Colonel Thorne's desk one morning. Thorne scanned it, frowning. "How?" Vance raised an eyebrow. "You already know how, sir." The colonel leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. His eyes drifted toward the armory through the office window. "I underestimated her," he admitted quietly. Vance didn't gloat. "A lot of us did." The colonel hesitated. "You think she'd take a promotion, officially?" Vance shook his head. "No, she doesn't want recognition. She wants results." Thorne sighed. "Still, there has to be a way to make it right." Vance gave a dry chuckle. "Maybe the best way is to stay out of her way." But respect, once earned, never comes without tests. Word of Fob Grizzly's turnaround reached higher command. A senior evaluator was coming for an inspection, not just of logistics, but of procedures, safety, and leadership culture. To Colonel Thorne, it was a double-edged sword. The outpost had never looked better, but he knew the truth. The change hadn't come from his command. It had come from the woman he'd publicly dismissed. He wrestled with the decision for days. Should he acknowledge her openly, or let the system take the credit, preserving the chain of command? Pride is a quiet poison in the military. It rarely kills fast. When the inspection team arrived, the colonel chose silence. The evaluation began at dawn. Clipboard officers in clean uniforms, checklists that never ended. The lead inspector, Lieutenant Colonel Alden, was the kind of man who smiled without warmth. "Let's see if your readiness reports match reality, Thorne," he said. Thorne forced a polite grin. "They will, sir." They started with the armory. Anna stood waiting, posture crisp, uniform spotless. She didn't look nervous, she never did. Alden's gaze swept over her like a scanner. "You're the quartermaster." "Yes, sir." "I read your logs. Impressive consistency, but logs don't always tell the whole story." "No, sir," she replied evenly. He picked up a random rifle from the rack. "Field condition." 98% operational, sir. Alden nodded. Prove it. Anna stepped forward, checking the weapon with calm precision. She cleared it, inspected the chamber, cycled the bolt, tested the safety. Every motion was smooth, mechanical, yet deeply personal. This one was reassembled 2 weeks ago, she said, glancing at the serial number. Extractor spring was replaced, gas ring tightened by .3 turns, buffer spring tension reset to spec. The inspector raised an eyebrow. You remember individual repairs. Every rifle has a personality, sir. Forget one, and it'll remind you at the wrong time. A chuckle rippled through the junior officers. Alden's smile thinned. We'll see if your philosophy holds up. He nodded to his aide. Load it, live fire test now. The aide hesitated. Sir, she's not on the firing roster. She is now. The soldiers nearby stiffened. A test, in front of everyone. Anna didn't flinch. She took the loaded rifle, checked the chamber, and walked to the firing lane. 50 meters, no warm-up, no rest, just dust, heat, and expectation. She exhaled once, then fired. 10 rounds, 10 hits, a perfect cluster dead center. The sound echoed like punctuation on a sentence that needed no explanation. When she lowered the weapon, the inspector's expression had softened despite himself. Well, Alden said, jotting something down, I'd say your readiness reports are accurate. Thorne let out a quiet breath of relief. But Anna didn't look at him. She was already reloading, disassembling, cleaning, her ritual unbroken. Alden turned to leave but paused. Tell me something, Master Sergeant. Why are you still out here? You could have retired years ago. Anna paused just long enough to meet his eyes. Because someone has to teach them what reliability really means, sir. Alden stared at her a moment longer, then nodded once and walked away. When he was gone, Thorne approached. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yes, I did, she replied. He needed to see it, not hear about it. He hesitated, searching for words. You know, I almost mentioned your old file, the SOG record, would have shut him up faster. Anna gave a small smile. Then he would have respected the story, not the work. Thorne nodded slowly. The truth of it landed harder than he'd expected. That evening, the inspection team departed, leaving behind glowing reports and reluctant admiration. Fob Grizzly had passed with distinction. As the soldiers celebrated, Anna stood outside the armory, watching the orange horizon fade into night. Garcia approached hesitant. Ma'am. She turned. Permission to ask something personal. Ask. He scratched the back of his neck. When you were fixing that rifle, Miller's, you looked different, like you were somewhere else. What were you thinking about? Anna's gaze drifted toward the darkened range. A promise, she said quietly. To who? She thought of Ryder, of Silva, of the fire and the noise and the broken canyon, of all the faces that never came back. To people who taught me what these scars are worth, she said finally. Garcia nodded, understanding more than she expected. You ever regret staying in? She smiled faintly. No, regret for people who quit before the work's done. He looked down at his own hands, clean but trembling slightly. I used to think being a good soldier meant shooting fast and yelling loud. You made me realize it's about care, about details. Anna studied him for a moment. That's how you keep people alive. Yeah, he said softly, you already did. He saluted her then, not out of formality, but gratitude, and walked away. For a long time, she stood alone in the cooling air, her reflection faint in the armory window. Behind her, the base hummed with laughter and celebration. In front of her, the desert stretched infinite and silent. And in that stillness, Anna Petrova finally allowed herself something rare, the smallest exhale of peace. But peace at the edge of war never lasts. 2 nights later, a convoy brought new equipment, untested rifles, part of a pilot program. Command wanted data. Fob Grizzly was chosen to trial them. They looked sleek, modern, efficient. Anna's gut twisted the moment she held one. Too light, too polished, too dependent on sensors and digital safeties. She knew what it meant. Another battle, not with bullets but with bureaucracy. Progress had its price, and she could already feel who'd be paying it. Because for Anna Petrova, the fight had never been about glory or competition. It was about one thing: making sure the weapon never failed the hands that held it. And now a new kind of failure was coming, one she couldn't fix with files and springs. This time, she'd have to fight for the soul of every soldier who believed in what she'd taught them. What happens when progress forgets purpose? The convoy arrived before sunrise, engines humming, metal groaning under crates stamped with sleek government logos. The soldiers gathered around, curious. New gear always stirred excitement. Sergeant Major Vance stood beside Anna as the first crate was unsealed. Inside lay a new model rifle, matte black, minimal seams, all angles and efficiency. It looked like something from a design lab, not a battlefield. Garcia whistled. Looks like a spaceship gun. The supply tech, a corporal with the smugness of someone carrying orders from above, grinned. That's because it practically is. New Gen 7 XM rifles, lightweight polymer frames, built-in diagnostics, internal recoil sensors, each one's paired with a data uplink. Tracks firing stats, cleaning cycles, even grip pressure. Chun picked one up, so it tells you when to clean it. Exactly, you'll never miss maintenance again. Vance folded his arms. Who authorized this? The corporal handed him a clipboard. Pilot program, division level. Colonel Thorne's unit was selected for field testing. Anna didn't speak. She was still holding one, weighing it, feeling it. It was too light. The balance was off. The polymer flexed slightly under pressure. Not enough to break, just enough to betray trust. It's efficient, the corporal continued, practically jam-proof. Anna turned the weapon over in her hands. Nothing's jam-proof. The corporal smirked. With respect, ma'am, it's a different generation now. The AI handles diagnostics faster than a human can blink. She set it back in the crate with care, not reverence, but unease. A weapon should answer to the person who carries it, not to a processor that's never heard gunfire. The corporal blinked. Excuse me. Vance stepped in before it escalated. You heard the sergeant. Log them in. We'll run field tests. The corporal shrugged and walked off. Vance waited until they were alone. You don't like them. Anna shook her head. They're clever, but clever doesn't survive dust, fear, or heat. These rifles will fail where it matters most, when the human stops trusting them. You gonna tell the colonel? He already knows. He just doesn't want to be the one who questions headquarters. Vance nodded grimly. You think they'll listen to you? Anna gave a thin smile. I don't need them to listen, I need them to see. Over the next week, the outpost trained with the new weapons. At first, the soldiers were impressed. The diagnostics feature glowed green when the rifle was in perfect condition, flashed yellow after heavy use, and red when the internal sensors predicted a malfunction. No guesswork, no maintenance logs. The machine told them when to care. Anna watched with growing concern. The young soldiers trusted the colors more than their instincts. Garcia joked, if it says green, I'm good. Chun followed with, yeah, no need to clean till it yells at me. She said nothing, just watched the neglect return, this time dressed in modern armor. Within days, the rifles began to show cracks, literally. Tiny hairline fractures along the polymer rails, sensors blinking yellow despite perfect function. The diagnostic system, overwhelmed by the heat and dust, misread performance data. During a night drill, one rifle locked itself mid-fire, a safety algorithm glitch triggered by misinterpreted recoil. The shooter, stunned, froze mid-attack. In real combat, That hesitation would have been fatal. Anna moved fast, grabbing the rifle, clearing the chamber, flipping the internal override. Her voice was calm but sharp enough to cut through panic. If it doesn't trust you, don't trust it. By morning, rumors spread. The new rifles weren't flawless. Colonel Thorne called a meeting in the ops tent. Vance, Anna, and a few key NCOs stood around the map table. "The brass wants feedback," Thorne said, tapping a report. "The field test's almost done. They're expecting a glowing review." Vance spoke first. "Sir, the diagnostics failed in 3 separate cases, malfunctions that wouldn't happen with standard weapons." Thorne's jaw tightened. "I'm aware." Anna looked up from her notes. "Then you'll report it honestly." The colonel hesitated. "You think honesty is what they want?" "I think it's what they need." His eyes hardened. "We're not in a position to question division directives, Master Sergeant. They'll call it operator error and we'll look incompetent." Anna stepped closer, voice low but unwavering. "If a rifle locks itself in combat, no one cares about whose fault it was. They just die." The silence stretched. Finally Thorne said, "This isn't your call." "No, sir," she said softly. "It's yours, but you'll be the one who signs your name to a weapon that fails good soldiers." She left the tent without waiting for dismissal. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat alone in the armory, surrounded by the quiet ghosts of rifles that had earned their scars honestly: metal, oil, sweat. The new ones gleamed in their racks, spotless and sterile, like strangers pretending to be soldiers. She picked one up and stripped it down under the dim light. Inside, she saw the truth: microsensors lining the chamber, pressure circuits sensitive enough to fail from a grain of dust. The polymer stock had microfractures invisible to the naked eye. It wasn't made for war, it was made for data. Her fingers hovered over the parts, her chest tight. This wasn't just bad design, it was betrayal. She heard the door creak behind her. Couldn't sleep either. It was Garcia. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, helmet under his arm. "Come in," she said. He walked closer, glancing at the half-disassembled rifle. "They look pretty, but they don't feel right." Anna nodded. "Pretty kills, reliability saves." Garcia frowned. "You think we should tell someone?" "We will when it matters." He hesitated. "You're not afraid of them, are you? The officers, the brass?" Anna smiled faintly. "I've seen what real fear looks like. It doesn't wear rank." Garcia nodded, unsure how to respond. After a pause, he said quietly, "You ever wonder why they picked you to be here?" She looked up. "Every day." He grinned. "I think I know. The universe needed someone stubborn enough to remind us what right looks like." Anna chuckled softly. "Then the universe has poor timing." He left soon after, but his words lingered. 2 days later, the inspection team requested a demonstration shoot with the new rifles. Headquarters wanted footage for a promotional reel, something to showcase the next generation of battlefield efficiency. Anna's stomach sank. Colonel Thorne briefed the team in the morning. Cameras, observers, even a representative from the manufacturer. The pressure was immense. "Make it look good," Thorne ordered. "That's an order." Anna stood at the edge of the formation, expression unreadable. When the exercise began, everything went smoothly at first. Soldiers moved through the firing lanes, calling out targets, executing drills. The rifles hummed with digital precision. Then halfway through, one weapon locked mid-burst. Then another. And another. Panic rippled through the line. Soldiers tapped safeties, reset triggers, nothing. The system had entered diagnostic lockdown, automatic halt mode triggered by false heat readings. The observers whispered. The manufacturer rep turned pale. Colonel Thorne's face flushed crimson. Anna stepped forward without waiting for orders. She grabbed one of the rifles, flipped the access plate, and disabled the diagnostic module manually. Manual override, old-fashioned way, she said, her voice cutting through the confusion. Shooters switch to mechanical. Trust your hands, not your screens. The soldiers obeyed instinctively. The next volley fired clean. Silence followed the final shot. The manufacturer rep sputtered something about environmental interference. Thorne ignored him. His eyes were on Anna. She holstered the rifle and turned to him. "Sir, that's your report. Honest, complete. The weapon fails under real conditions." Thorne stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. "Write it," he said quietly. "Your words, not mine." She blinked, surprised. He continued, voice steady. "If I'm going to send a report up the chain, it's going to be the truth. You earned that much." Anna looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who'd been broken, rebuilt, and humbled in the same dust she'd walked through. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "No," he replied, "thank you." That night she sat on the range again, the air still and heavy. The test was over, but something deeper had shifted. She knew this wasn't the end of the fight. Bureaucracy never forgets humiliation. But for now, she allowed herself to breathe. She glanced at her hands, the lines, the scars, the burn marks long since faded to pale silver. Once she'd thought they were proof of her brokenness. Now she knew better. They were reminders that no matter how advanced a weapon became, no machine would ever replace the human who carried it with care and courage. The wind moved softly across the empty range, carrying the faint smell of oil and dust. She whispered to the night, "Still here, still building." And somewhere deep in the silence, the desert seemed to answer, not in words, but in the steady rhythm of peace earned, not given. How much truth can a chain of command really carry before it snaps? Anna's report went up the line the next morning. 4 pages, no rhetoric, no excuses, just facts. XM-series rifles demonstrated catastrophic sensor failure during live fire. Environmental exposure renders diagnostic reliability below 60%. Recommend termination of field use until re-engineered for combat conditions. It should have ended there, filed, reviewed, acted upon. But truth rarely travels quietly in a system built on pride. Within 48 hours, the storm hit. The first warning came through the comms center. Division Command had flagged her report as potentially obstructive. The words were cold, bureaucratic, yet they carried weight heavier than bullets. Colonel Thorne was summoned to a video briefing with the generals. When he emerged, his face was gray. "Division wants a revision," he told Vance in a low voice. "They said our tone undermines confidence in procurement. They want me to rewrite the report, blame user error." Vance exhaled through his nose. "You told them no." "I told them we'd discuss it." They both looked toward the armory, where Anna was working in silence. "She's not going to discuss anything," Vance muttered. Thorne nodded. "I know." Inside, Anna was recalibrating the old rifles again, her way of finding calm. When Thorne entered, she didn't look up. "I take it the report reached them," she said. "It reached them," he answered. "And they're not happy." She set the wrench down, finally meeting his eyes. "Truth rarely makes anyone happy, sir." He hesitated. "They're asking me to edit your findings, to soften them." Anna's gaze didn't waver. "Soften the facts or the conscience?" Thorne rubbed a hand across his face. "You don't understand how political this is. The contract for those rifles runs into millions. If this base is seen as non-compliant, it'll follow all of us." "I can live with that," she said. "I'm not sure I can," he whispered. Anna stepped closer. "Sir, those soldiers trusted those weapons because they trusted you. You let them believe the system cared about their lives more than its image. Don't take that from them." The words hung in the air like tension in a trigger spring. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Leave the report with me." When he left, she didn't believe him, but she hoped. By the next day, rumors spread like wildfire. Someone had leaked the inspection footage, the jammed rifles, the chaos, Anna stepping in to fix them. No one knew who. The video raced through the network, shared between bases, picked up by training forums. Soldiers everywhere watched the armory sergeant from Grizzly save a failing demonstration with her bare hands. The headlines were harmless at first. Veteran NCO corrects system failure in field demo. Then defensive. No evidence, XM rifles unsafe, officials say. Then hostile. Unauthorized personnel interfered with test. Within 72 hours, an inquiry was announced. 2 officers arrived at Grizzly, Major Keller and Captain Lowe, polite smiles, sharp eyes. They claimed it was routine fact-finding. Everyone knew better. They called Anna in first. The interview room was small, windowless, hot. A recorder sat on the table. Master Sergeant Petrova, Keller began smoothly, your report contains statements that conflict with manufacturer data. Could you explain the basis for your conclusions? Anna folded her hands. Observation, repetition, outcome. Lowe leaned forward. So, personal opinion. Experience, she corrected. Keller smiled tightly. Do you have evidence of deliberate negligence? No, sir, just physics. Silence. Keller's tone sharpened. Did you authorize the leak of the demonstration footage? No. Do you know who did? No. He studied her for a long moment. You're aware this incident has embarrassed several commands. If someone were found responsible for disseminating classified training material. It wasn't classified when it happened, Anna interrupted softly. Lowe's jaw tightened. Keller sighed. You're making this difficult, Master Sergeant. Anna met his gaze. So is the truth. They ended the session 20 minutes later, frustrated. Outside, Vance was waiting. How bad? They wanted me to lie politely, she said. He nodded grimly. That's becoming a theme. That night the base felt different, tense, watched. Soldiers spoke in whispers. Even the wind seemed quieter, as if the desert itself were listening. When Anna entered the mess hall, conversation stopped. Then, one by one, heads lifted. Garcia was the first to stand. Ma'am, he said, voice firm, if they're coming for you, they'll have to come through us. Chun rose next. We back you, Master Sergeant. Then Miller and others. The whole hall stood. No orders, no hesitation. Anna froze, the weight of it sinking in. She wasn't used to being defended. She looked around the room, faces young, earnest, stubborn. She saw the kind of loyalty she'd thought had died with her old unit. Sit down, she said finally, her voice steady. You'll draw the wrong kind of attention. Garcia shook his head. Attention's already here. She almost smiled. Then at least make it worth something. The inquiry officers spent 2 more days collecting statements. Each one told the same story. The rifles failed, Petrova fixed them. The truth was in the report. By the time they left, even they seemed tired of pretending otherwise. But bureaucracy has many faces, and some are patient. A week later, orders arrived. Master Sergeant Anna Petrova, temporary reassignment pending review of conduct. No accusation, no date of return. Just removal. Thorne read it twice before taking it to her. When he entered the armory, she was packing quietly, her movements calm, almost rehearsed. He set the paper down. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said. You warned me. He shook his head. No, I warned myself. You did what every good soldier should. She paused. Tell them to keep cleaning their rifles. I will, he said, voice thick. Where will they send you? Doesn't matter. I'll find another armory somewhere. There's always one that needs fixing. He reached out, then stopped short, unsure if a handshake was enough. Finally, he saluted. For what it's worth, Anna, I'd follow you anywhere. She returned the salute. Then keep this place alive. When the convoy came to take her, the entire battalion stood in formation, unauthorized, spontaneous. No speeches, no ceremony. Garcia stepped forward, presenting a small box. Inside was a single, cleaned bolt carrier group, engraved with a phrase scratched by hand. Still building. Anna closed the lid gently, eyes burning. Thank you. Vance leaned close as she boarded the truck. You made them soldiers, Kestrel. Don't forget that. She smiled faintly. I never forget what I build. The truck pulled away, the dust swallowing her silhouette. The soldiers didn't move until the last trace of it vanished into the horizon. Weeks passed. Fob Grizzly returned to routine, but it wasn't the same. The soldiers kept the old rifles spotless, even when new shipments arrived. They trained harder, cleaned slower, cared deeper. And in the quiet moments, when the wind swept through the range, they swore they could still hear the faint clink of tools, the soft hum of a woman whispering to steel. Far away, in another nameless armory, Anna Petrova unpacked her few belongings. Different base, different faces, same dust. She placed the small engraved bolt on the workbench, set her tools beside it, and began counting the new rifles lined along the wall. Each one told her a story. Each one needed her hands. And somewhere deep inside, despite the exhaustion, she smiled. Because exile didn't mean defeat. It meant someone, somewhere, still trusted her to care. Yet change, once started, doesn't stop. And as command scrambled to contain the fallout of her report, whispers of reform began. Quiet meetings, canceled contracts, new testing protocols. Her name never appeared in the memos, but her work echoed through them. At Fob Grizzly, Colonel Thorne received the update months later. XM rifle program, indefinite suspension pending redesign. He read it twice, then folded the paper and smiled. Guess she won, Vance muttered. No, Thorne said softly, looking toward the distant desert. She just reminded us what winning really means. How do you measure a legacy that doesn't seek applause? The desert didn't change much. It never does. Wind still carved the same ridges into the hills. Sand still found its way into everything: boots, barrels, lungs, thoughts. But Anna Petrova had changed. Her new posting, a logistics depot near the border, was smaller, quieter. Less chaos, more monotony. Most soldiers here didn't even carry rifles daily. They processed shipments, repaired transport vehicles, checked paperwork. No one knew her history. No one asked. That suited her fine. She spent her first week learning the layout, the people, the pace. It was a slower kind of war here, one fought against rust, bureaucracy, and time. Still, every night she walked to the maintenance shed after hours, tools in hand. She'd find one weapon, old, neglected, forgotten, and rebuild it, piece by piece. Not because she had to, because it reminded her she still could. One evening as she worked, a young private wandered in. Ma'am. She looked up. He couldn't have been more than 19, all nervous posture and untested pride. Need something? She asked. He held out a broken trigger assembly. They told me you're the one who can fix things. She smiled faintly. Sometimes. He hesitated, watching her hands move. Is it true what they say, that you used to teach combat units? Who they? He shrugged. People talk, said you were at some place called Grizzly. Anna paused for a heartbeat, then returned to her work. That was a long time ago. Was it true about the rifles? She tightened a screw, eyes fixed. Depends what part you mean. He leaned forward. The part where you saved your whole base. She stopped, finally meeting his gaze. No one saves a base alone, Private. You save it by teaching people to care about what they touch. Everything else is noise. He looked confused, but he nodded anyway. Still sounds like something worth doing. She handed him back the repaired trigger. "Then go do it." He grinned, "Yes, ma'am." As he left, she stared at the door for a moment, realizing she just repeated the same words Ryder once told her, years ago. Funny how lessons travel when you stop owning them. Weeks turned into months. She heard whispers about the XM project, quietly canceled, redesigned, reissued under another name. Some said her report had started it. Others claimed it was just coincidence. She didn't care either way. What mattered was that soldiers would carry weapons that worked when their lives depended on them. That was enough. But one morning, something unexpected arrived. A small package marked Fob Grizzly, returned to sender. Inside was a letter, folded twice, and a familiar engraved bolt carrier group. The same one Garcia had given her when she left. Her hands trembled as she opened the letter. "Ma'am, you probably won't like that I called you that, but too bad. Things have been different here since you left. We kept the old rifles. The colonel fought to keep them, said, if it's not broken, don't fix it. He got away with it somehow. We started something new. Every new recruit cleans their rifle by hand before firing their first round. We call it the Petrova Standard. I don't think you'd approve of the name either, but it's stuck. They made me an instructor. I tell the kids the story, not the legend, just the lesson. That care isn't weakness. That precision is protection. That your scars aren't shame. They're proof you kept fixing things even after they broke. We thought you'd want the bolt back. You already built what it stood for. Still building always." Garcia. Anna stared at the page for a long time. No tears, just silence, deep, steady, filled with something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. That night she walked outside. The horizon glowed faintly orange, the sun sinking into dunes like cooling metal. She sat on a crate, holding the bolt in her hands. For the first time, she didn't see scars. She saw maps, every burn, every cut a line leading her here. She whispered softly, almost to herself. Maybe that's what they meant, Silva. Maybe rebuilding wasn't about rifles at all. The desert answered with wind. She smiled. A week later, she was called to headquarters. Colonel Thorne was waiting, older, tired, but with the same quiet authority. "You're hard to find," he said as she entered. "You always knew where to look," she replied. He chuckled, still sharp. They talked over coffee in silence for a while before he slid an envelope across the desk. "Retirement papers," he said. "Optional this time. You can take them or not, up to you." She raised an eyebrow. "You came all this way for paperwork." He smiled. "No, I came to tell you something." She waited. "They gave me a commendation last month for the training program at Grizzly. I told them it wasn't mine. I told them it belonged to you." She frowned. "I didn't do it for commendations." "I know," he said softly. "That's why it mattered." They sat there a while longer. Two soldiers who'd survived more than battles, who'd learned that the hardest fights were often the quiet ones. When he finally stood, he saluted. "For what it's worth, Master Sergeant, the Army doesn't deserve you, but it needed you." She returned the salute, voice steady. "And what it needs isn't always what it rewards." Thorne smiled sadly, "Still quoting your own morals." "Just remembering the ones that stuck." He nodded once, then left. Later that night, Anna walked back to the shed. The air was cool, the stars sharp and distant. She laid the bolt on the workbench beside her tools. For the first time in a long time, she didn't pick anything up. She just looked at her hands, the ones they'd mocked, doubted, whispered about. The ones that had held rifles, steadied men, and rebuilt trust piece by piece. Every scar pulsed faintly under the dim light, like quiet proof that she had lived exactly as she'd meant to. Repairing what others broke, not for pride, but for purpose. She closed her eyes and let her thoughts drift to Garcia's grin, Chun's stubbornness, Thorne's grudging respect, Vance's dry wisdom. to the sound of laughter in the barracks that once mocked her and now carried her name. She thought of the simple truth that had carried her through it all. You can't control who doubts you. You can only decide what you build in spite of them. In the following months, word spread quietly through the ranks. Petrova retired. No ceremony, no press release. She just walked off base one morning, toolbox in hand, leaving her quarters spotless and her tools perfectly arranged. But every base she'd ever served in, every outpost that had seen her pass through, kept something small of hers behind. A wrench on a hook, a bolt engraved with two words. Still building. They became a quiet tradition. No one taught it formally. No manual recorded it. But every new soldier learned it sooner or later. When you clean your weapon, you whisper those words, not out loud, just enough to remember what they mean. Still building. Still standing. Still human. Years later, long after her name faded from rosters, recruits at Grizzly still asked about the woman in the old photo on the wall. The one with the steady eyes and scarred hands, standing beside a rifle she'd rebuilt from scraps. And the veterans would smile and say, she wasn't famous, she was just someone who refused to quit fixing things. Because that's the truth about dignity, it doesn't shout. It doesn't demand medals or apologies. It speaks in action, in patience, in scars that never stop working. And when the world finally quiets down, long after the noise fades, it leaves behind something unshakable. A weapon that fires true. A soldier who learned to care. And a legacy built not from victory, but from hands that never stopped rebuilding. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.